Welcome back to the channel, folks, and to another couple of battle reports. These were recorded at our monthly meetup at Nightly Gaming in Bathgate, and for once I'm actually playing in a meetup. Previous meetings we've always ended up with an uneven number. This time we've ended up with an even number, including me, so I'll get to play, which is good. You know, it's good to play. Good to try out other lists or against maybe on different players, but certainly on different terrain and terrain setups, so things aren't getting put down the way I'm used to and so on. We actually had lots of call-offs for this meetup, unfortunately. Some people have got some illnesses, so we're all just hoping that they're getting better, and we'll see them on the next one. Now we're playing the desert. In this mid-war desert, we've got some, what have we got for you? In these actual games, you've got me playing British, two different lists of British up against Italians and Germans. There was also an American list that Mark brought, but you've seen that before in a game I played against Mark, a desert game I played against Mark. Scouts out if you want to check out an American Lee list. But we're going to be seeing two games with myself. I shall start with the first game against Peter's Italians. We'll start by having a look at my list, and then we'll get onto the floor, so to speak, check his list, the mission, and then get on with the game. Here is the list for the first game, and it is a infantry formation and a crusader formation. Now, as you can see, you get a hell of a lot for your points in this kind of setup. To give you an idea, like all those crusaders is only 28 points, which leaves a lot of points for a lot of other things, but I'll go through it. Company command and 2 platoons. These are the full-size platoons with a light mortar and an anti-tank rifle. And then still within the formation we've got heavy machine guns, 4 mortars and 4 6-pounders. Now these guys are all careful, so they're hard to hit. It makes these 6-pounders hard to hit, 3+ save, anti-tank 9, and I think they're fearless as well. Quite a nasty unit. And then, just to go to the other formation, there's a company HQ at the back, which is 2 2-pounders and 2 howitzers, and then 3 platoons of 2 6-pounders plus 1 2-pounder. The green camo are the 2-pounders, the browns the 6, and the plain are the howitzers. Nice easy way to follow them on the tabletop. And then backing them up, you've got 25-pounders, which are good in direct fire and also really effective in artillery bombardments with anti-tank 3, which is getting into the useful range. They've got an observer, and then lots of scouts. Now there's the Humbers, the Daimlers, and the universal carriers. Now I'm short 1 platoon of universal carriers because you can actually get another platoon. I can't think where those minis are. Now there may be better options you can put into your list that I currently do not have. So I'm just counting it as 2 platoons of universal carriers. Now that is dependent on whether or not everything gets on the table. Now what will be on at the start will be all these. Yep, infantry and guns. I don't think the observer can make it on the way I've got it set up. Everything else is in reserves, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 platoons. So you can imagine what that will be like, especially in delayed reserves, trying to get that all on the table. And that's a big problem for lists which have lots of small tank platoons. And then also these guys, they'll arrive piecemeal, most likely, with these guys having slow firing, the 6-pounders, which means hitting careful targets will need 5s. So 3 dice, 2 of them needing 5s, 1 on a 4, and the good one, which is on a 4, has only got anti-tank 7. You know, so I get the feeling these guys will arrive piecemeal and get destroyed piecemeal. But we shall see what happens, folks. I'm determined to use them and give them a go. I've got greater expectations from these guys, even from the armoured cars, folks. You know, if you use armoured cars right, especially in mid-war, where they can hurt things, maybe more easily than in late war, then you can get a bit of leverage from your armour cars too. But there you go, folks, quite a big British formation for the first game. Let's look at Peter's really nice looking Italian force. Now it's a Semoventi formation with a M1441 HQ tank and a platoon of 5 M1441s, 2 platoons of 5 Semoventis, a battery of 100mm artillery, an infantry platoon, an armour car observer for the artillery, and then German allies being platoon of 4 Panzer IVs, one of them short barrelled and 3 of them long barrelled. So there's the Italians, lots of artillery there. Let's see how they get on. The mission we are playing is Bridgehead, and from a defender's point of view it's quite a tricky one because your deployment zone is not very large and you're having to squeeze everything into that, which can make it vulnerable to artillery because artillery templates can easily catch multiple units. And plotting an ambush is quite challenging too because of the small area. There might not be a lot of suitable terrain in that area, especially as your opponent can outflank you. So you have to think carefully about what side you're going to defend on. And then you've also got scattered reserves, which isn't too bad in this because they're not arriving too far away from the objectives, and you can potentially be attacking your opponent's advance in the flank. The special rules are quite straightforward: ambush for the defender, deep scattered immediate reserves for the defender, and minefields. So you can at least maybe channel your opponent's attack to one degree or another with the minefields. Otherwise, it just comes down to where is the attack going to come in from. Here is my deployment. You can see first of all objectives there towards the front. There's the rather small deployment zone, a couple of objectives there, and some minefields, block in the middle and one flank to a degree. Now I've got a heavy machine gun platoon, and then behind them an infantry platoon reaching over to these houses, plus company command, then another infantry platoon with the mortars central, and then the artillery able to look either way behind them, and of course 6-pounders in ambush. For Peter's deployment, the centralist attack doesn't look very promising with all the buildings and the minefields, so he's clearly massing on my right. Now you can see he's leaving his Semoventis behind for bombardment purposes and racing his armour up behind that hill, keeping out of any potential ambush. I should have said Peter didn't get any special rolls on his Italian dice. He wasn't very lucky. And then in terms of shooting, basically lots of artillery ranged in on my artillery. 2 Semoventi batteries and the 100mm battery. They all ranged in, got a couple of hits but no kills, but I could be in trouble next turn when I'm re-rolling saves. My first turn I unpinned the artillery and got 1 platoon of Crusaders in, who are hull down on that ridge to get some flank shots on the Panzers. Infantry, I'm kind of moving around the flank a bit. I'm worried about keeping my gun safe. And then heavy machine guns and the other platoon are moving out to outflank the approaching infantry and also just try and secure the middle of that table, because that's another approach towards the objective. For shooting, the Crusaders actually did quite well. They killed a tank, killed a Panzer III, which is as much as you could hope to do. Now the artillery ranged in on the Italian infantry and got a kill. The mortars failed to range in. But then the heavy machine guns, some stationary, some moving, plus the infantry moving up into that walled area, got so many hits, but only 1 more kill in the infantry. In the next turn, Peter unpinned his infantry and moved into the house, and in the shooting, 1 battery, that's all it took, of Semoventis killed 3 guns. These guys moved around to shoot the Crusaders on the side, didn't really do anything. The Panzer IIIs stayed stationary and then shooted and scooted and killed 2 and bailed 1. But the 100mm, the battery of 100mm was looking to lay a smoke screen between the M1441s and my potential ambush positions, as we see here, and they didn't range in. They rolled 3 1s to range in, so I've got an ambush coming up, I think. In my starting step, I got reserves. The Crusader platoon died, by the way, the one on the ridge, ran away. Then I popped my ambush as well as I could, depending on terrain and concealment. My infantry, getting into stronger positions, just moving around to shoot at the Italian infantry, and that was my 25 pounder, the fearless 25 pounder that ran away. So for shooting, these Italians in the house are getting absolutely clobbered by mortars and direct fire, but they're taking it. Now over here, the ambush was the most effective here. It got 1 kill and 3 bales. The Crusaders managed to get another kill, leaving just the company command, and I deliberately put 2 infantry beside those Crusaders, and the one on the left closed in on the bailed out tank. The commander was too close to counter-attack, so the assault ended and I captured all those bailed out tanks. Peter's turn, the infantry did not unpin. The Panzer IIIs have moved into position to keep away from anti-tank guns as much as possible, then fire down range at those Crusaders. Then when it came to shooting, Peter's luck wasn't in this turn. His 3 batteries firing, hoping to do damage against my anti-tank guns as much as possible. Only 1 actually ranged in, and didn't actually get any kills this turn, but it is in a position to do a bit of damage next turn. Now you can see what happened to the tanks there. 2 bales from the fire from the Panzer IIIs, but they'll be motivating one way or another next turn. And for motivation, the tanks did not go back in, the 2 bailed ones, and then they failed their 5-up blast stand. At least the anti-tank gun and the infantry unpinned. So I then kind of drew my line back towards the objective a bit. I got reserves in. Company HQ, dropping off the howitzers, moving the commands up, and then I'm moving back towards this wood. I'm still keeping pressure on the guys in the house, but they're doing really well with their saves. I'm moving the anti-tank guns up a bit to do a bit of counter-fire potentially against the tank assault, because I think I've got those infantry where I need them, but not so much the tanks, and I'm not sure if they might be able to push me off the objective, so that's my main concern. Peter just kind of stayed put and shooted there. He's doing a bit of shooting and scooting at the moment, but they didn't do anything effective, those Panzer IIIs. Now you can see he's got 2 Semiventi and 1 100mm battery ranged in around that corner of the wood, but all those hits only caused 1 casualty in the form of a destroyed infantry base. He's really got that corner under a lot of pressure, but he's not killed anything this turn. Maybe next turn, and they're still pinned, so staying put. I passed all of my unpinnings and got my last platoon on, of Crusaders that is. Came on here, went up behind the wood because I've only got 2 platoons left from that formation. I need to keep them safe. Lose one of them and I will definitely lose the other, so just protect the objective. My infantry moved out, by the way, to prepare for an assault on the Italians in the building. They were down to 6 paces. Tried to range in some artillery just off to the side so it wouldn't affect my assault. I either didn't range in or didn't get any hits from my 2-gun Crusader battery. Managed to get 1 hit on a Panzer III, but it managed to make a save. And then the assault on the house worked successfully. I killed a couple of bases. Peter failed to motivate, so the survivors have ran back towards that wood and into some cover. That helped secure the objective from the front. I think it's turn 5, so Peter's having to move up closer to the objective. He's moving his Panzer IIIs in, and then he's also going to bring up one of his Semiventi platoons to get a bit closer, get a better view, and maybe do some direct firing too. And when it came to firing, the 2 remaining artillery batteries are now ranged in right there between the wood and the building. Lots and lots of targets, target-rich environment. This turn all they managed to get though was 1 base of infantry. The anti-tank gun survived and also took some direct fire from the Panzer IIIs and survived. And then the Semoventis did some shooting, long-range shooting at dug-in infantry at the wood. They did 7, so they actually managed to get a hit, and I failed my save, but then he failed his firepower.
My turn 5, the anti-tank was unpinned, but the infantry didn't. And then I got two more reserves, the armoured cars coming in from this corner, moving up out of sight. Crusaders edging up a bit for defensive fire purposes. And then in terms of shooting, it was really, I think, just heavy machine gun fire into the survivors in the wood, and I think I got one base, and that was it really for me. I'm kind of just shaping up for turn 6 now. Peter's turn 6. Now the Panzer IIIs are staying within 8 inches of the objectives, the Semi-Ventis moving up. Then the infantry also prepared for an assault, by the way, out of that wood. The artillery managed to kill a gun. Got rid of one of the 6-pounders, and I don't think they killed anything in the wood. The Panzer IIIs fired at a 6-pounder but failed a firepower to kill. They also fired into the wood and got a kill. The Semi-Ventis fired into the wood as well and got a kill, and the infantry fired into the house and got a kill, which set it up nicely for the assault. Now the assault itself went into the house and it made it in past the defensive fire, killed a base of infantry, but then I motivated and they lost one base on the way in. I motivated and killed the 2 remaining bases, so that's the end of the Italian infantry. My turn 6. The infantry motivated. The guns didn't unpin, but they stayed. They were on a last stand. So I got a last reserves on, some universal carriers. These guys are staying behind the wood. The Daimlers moving up with the 2-pounders. Then the heavy machine guns are moving back towards the objective. Some infantry moved out towards the side. I also put a smoke screen down. You can see those black markers for a potential assault, and then it all went a bit mad. He passed a cross check to get out, moving away from the enemy, fired, got a hit and a kill. Anti-tank 9 against 5, armour 5. And the Daimlers anti-tank 7 against armour 5 got a hit and a kill. And then my 2 bases made in the assault got a hit and a bail, ending the assault and therefore ending the game because there was no German teams within 8 inches of the objective. A bit of a mad end to the turn with some significant dice rolls there, folks.
That game went pretty much as I would have expected in some respects. You know, the Crusaders arriving piecemeal and getting shot up piecemeal. But you've got to throw them in there, you know, they may well get blown to bits, but you have to throw them in and try and take some things out. But that game really came down to a couple of turns. There was Peter's smoke barrage, and I've been in that situation before myself, where you really need the smoke barrage, but it just doesn't range in. You rolled 3 1s, and that really put paid to his Italian tank platoon. And then also in that final turn, his saving throws were just terrible, which prevented him from getting his second Semi-Venti platoon up close enough to start causing a bit of damage, maybe getting in the assault. He rolled so many 1s again for his saving throws. So he did the right thing, but it didn't. The dice made sure he didn't get the right result, but doing the right thing is the most important lesson to learn anyway. You know, you've got to do the right thing and then hope that everything else works. And then looking at Peter's list, we both thought the Semi-Ventis were a bit of a double-edged sword. They were really good at bombarding because of the reroll misses, because there's 5 of them, and they've got a good anti-tank, a good firepower and bombardment, really quite effective weapons. But then you're tempted to hold them back and use them to bombard, especially when you're up against an opponent which has got infantry and guns, especially if those are anti-tank guns that can hurt your tanks. You tend to hold back, and then you lose a bit of momentum. When you start taking casualties up front, they're not there to fill the gaps. So that's a bit of a challenge when using them. But otherwise, I enjoy playing against the Italians. Peter's not used them much. He used them in another game against Mark's Americans. They were playing Gauntlet, and Mark's reserves arrived long before the Italian reserves arrived, and I think that really made it difficult for Peter to get a win in that game too. So Mark got a win against Italians in the second game. But as I said, Italian's very interesting. There's much more to see with them. And Peter's got a really lovely looking Italian force, so I do hope to see them again. Anyway, let's go on to the second game, starting with a look at my list. And this time it's against Tom using a fairly sort of classic Panzer III list with support. Here is the list for the second game, much smaller than the first game, but with much tougher tanks. So these are the Grants with a 37mm secondary weapon, 75mm main weapon, anti-tank 7, anti-tank 9, 24-inch range for both of them. So this is one formation with support, guys. So if these guys break, there could be a lot of things leaving the table. So I need to be careful with them. I've not tried to get two formations like an infantry formation because I like to have a mix of things. You know, maybe I could have thinned things out a bit and got an infantry formation, but possibly losing a degree of flexibility, just looking for survivability. So this has got HQ platoon of 3 and then 2 platoons of 3. An infantry platoon, 6-pounders, 25-pounders with a spotter and the 2 armour car patrols that you tend to see me using all the time. And that's it, folks. But with this list I can hold ground if I'm half off, half on. Sorry, that's old V3 language. If I'm in reserves, I can have them on, them on, them on, and a platoon of tanks to keep my head down until I can get the reserves in. These guys, they are careful. They don't have slow firing on the main gun, but they will have on their secondary weapon if they're firing their main gun. But being able to fire twice from each one in mid-war against maybe side armour of 3 or even front armour 5, you probably find these 37mm will kill just as many things as the 75s. So I quite like these. It's one of my favourite tanks in terms of its completely and utterly mad layout. You know, it's like looks like it's been designed by somebody who doesn't know what a tank should do, but it was still very useful and well received in the desert. And as I said, it's one of my favourite. And once again, I'll have some armoured cars to try and plug some gaps or take advantage of some openings. So there you go, folks. Let's see how these guys get on. Oh, and a quick summary of Tom's list. It's a Panzer III formation, HQ of 1 long, 1 short, a platoon of 2 long, 1 short, and then I think a platoon of 2 short, 2 longs, if that makes sense to you. And then 3 Marders, 2 long-range schleppers, 4 Panzer IIs, and a platoon of Italian infantry. And when he rolled for his Italian dice, whatever that thing is, to see if they're elite, he didn't get them elite. And that's it, folks. That's Tom's list.
The mission for this second game is Scouts Out, which we have played a couple of times recently. It's a meeting engagement where you can see the deployment zones are diagonally opposite each other. One player will be nominal, the attacker, to choose what side they want to attack from. Now, you'll notice that one objective deployment area is inside and one is outside both players' deployment zones. So whilst you can start defending an objective, you have to move on to the other objective to prevent it falling into the hands of the enemy. So there is a very definite mobile element to this game where you have to get up and get about each other, risk taking an objective whilst trying not to lose one of your own. The special rules are quite straightforward. Meeting engagement for the first player, delayed reserves for both. And that meeting engagement rule means the first player is not bombarding, moving at firing at moving rate of fire even, and no aeroplanes in the first turn. And the delayed reserves for both can mean this game can be a bit of a slow burner as both sides try to build up their forces. I place my objectives there and there on the road and in the corner in a very similar kind of deployment for Tom's objectives. And then I have infantry, artillery, tanks, armour cars, and a screen of anti-tank guns forward. Then you can see Marders, Panzer IIIs, and then after a spearhead move, the Lorraine Schleppers, an 88, and the Panzer IIs on a hill dominating that side of the table. Tom has rolled first turn, so he's getting his tanks out of line of sight of my 6-pounders. That includes the Panzer IIIs, Marders, and the Lorraine Schleppers that are moving off the hill, with the Panzer IIs moving over to threaten that open objective that I have infantry near to but not on. Turn 1 movement for me is to react to that initial move from Tom. My armour cars are moved over, infantry moved up with the help of a follow me, and the Grants are moving up out of line of sight off that 88, ready to threaten those Panzer IIs. And I'm going to call in some artillery on the Lorraine Schleppers, which, believe it or not, actually bails one, and then Tom fails to get back in, fails to motivate to stay, fails his last stand, it is, and he loses that platoon. So Tom pulls his Panzer IIs back, positions his other tanks, including the Marders, out of line of sight of my guns, uses his 8-8 to kill one of my 25-pounders, the only one who could see him back. My turn 2, not much in the way of movement at all. The infantry tried to dig in but failed. They took a few pot shots at the 88 and didn't get any damage, and then my observer could see the Marders, so I thought I'll have a go at them, and believe it or not, I managed to kill a Marder with the 25-pounders. Nothing else can see the enemy at the moment. Tom is just waiting for his reserves and keeping out of line of sight of things at the moment. Nothing much for me in my next turn either. I just repositioned my my Grants, sorry, and then one artillery bombardment on Panzer IIIs. I managed to hit all 3 once again, but he made all 3 saves this time, and you can see his reserves are coming on in his turn. So Tom is going to move those infantry forward to try and threaten my anti-tank guns that are kind of threatening his tanks in a big way, and he doesn't want to take them on head on. So he's keeping the rest of his force either gone to ground like the 88, or the tanks are moving up behind terrain, tall terrain where they can't be seen, whilst he's trying to build up his strength and maybe whittle down my anti-tank guns. And there was very little movement from me that turn too. My armour cars moved over more towards the middle of the table, and my guns are staying gone to ground to give me the best chance possible of delivering a knockout blow to anything that sticks its head around all this tall terrain. The only shooting was artillery that ranged in on the Marders, got a hit, but Tom saved fine this time. Next turn, Tom has got more reserves coming on, and he's massing his Panzer IIIs in the centre there of his deployment zone, and the infantry, they're just trying to push out of the broken ground in the centre of the table there towards my guns, and the Panzer IIs are doing the hokey cokey and coming back out from behind that hill again and shooting up my infantry to no effect. The 88 also had a go at my anti-tank guns, but needed a 7 to hit and didn't get any hits. So I've got reserves in, a platoon of the Grants, and they're taking a bit of cover. They can be seen and be seen, but they're taking cover there. The armour cars moved out, got a couple of bases of infantry, and the other Grants have moved back around onto the road to threaten those Panzer IIs again. I wonder if they'll move back. Next turn for Tom, and he gets his Panzer III HQ on. He's pulling the infantry back because it's a bit of a suicide mission to attack over there, and then he's positioning his tanks out with the range or line of sight of my anti-tank guns, but within line of sight where possible of my armour cars, so he can maybe punish them for shooting up those infantry and sticking their necks out. But he gets no hits, there's no impact this turn at all. My next turn and more reserves arrive, so I've got 3 platoons of Grants lined up on the rear and front of those Panzer IIIs. I got lots of hits, but Tom's saving throws were quite good, and he ended up with just one dead and one bailed, so that could have gone worse for him. And he's got a chance to remount that single one, which he does successfully, saving the platoon from a motivation check. And my infantry continue to shoot at that 88 that's being a real thorn in my side, even though it's not shooting anything. All of Tom's forces are now on the table. He moved back out of the danger zone with those near Panzer IIIs, kept the other ones at long range, where he could employ his long 5 centimetres against my nearest platoon of Grants, and he managed to get one hit, but I managed to save. And then he shoots and scooted, so he was even further out of range of any retaliation from me, without movement that is. My final reserves arrived, the armoured cars, and there was a lot of dashing and following me going on here to get forces up to start threatening that objective on the road. The other Grants moved into the middle of the table behind the house, once again out of line of sight. The 3rd platoon stayed put beside the wood, and then the armoured cars moved up onto the road. Only shooting was at his 88s because I can't see or reach any of his tanks. With his Marders on the right of the screen, near to the lake there, he's moving up all of his Panzer IIIs to protect that objective, but once again staying out of line of sight of my anti-tank guns. So I've now gathered my Grants behind that hill, moved the armoured cars up further forward behind the house, kept the other ones further back. I also, by the way, previously moved my observers, so now we can try and drop artillery on that annoying 88. I ranged in this turn, but I didn't manage to get a hit on it, so it's still there as a threat. My anti-tank guns are still gone to ground. Thomas doesn't like my position on that hill, so he's either pulled his Panzer IIIs back or moved them behind the tall terrain there, with the Marders just off to the right. And the infantry are moving over as well to perhaps support the objective, because it looks as though it's now under threat. So I've got a platoon of Grants that have dashed up along that road. These guys tried to blitz up onto the crest of the hill, hull down, but failed, but they are still looking over, and the armoured cars have moved onto the objective. The only real firing was a smoke barrage across those armoured cars to make them more survivable. So Tom has blitzed the Panzer IIIs near to my armoured cars. 2 of them have then moved to see behind into the smoke. 2 have stayed put with the full rate of fire to shoot through the concealment and the smoke. The other Panzer IIIs are moving up from the back of the table, and the infantry are just trying to dig in. Then the 88 finally got to do some shooting and killed one of the Grants on the crest of the hill with a 6. And the rest of the shooting went badly, though. A total of 6 dice, needing between a 5 and a 7 because of the smoking various concealment to hit, and there was no hits, which meant the game ended as there was no Panzer IIIs within 4 of the objective.
So folks, that was a bit of a long, torturous, drawn out clash. I can't even call it a clash because there were so few things killed. I lost a 25 pounder and a Grant. The Grant was in the last turn of the game, and I killed, I think maybe two bases of infantry, a Marder, a Panzer III, and the Lyrian Schleppers that ran away. There was very little in the way of casualties in that game because the terrain had so much, there was so much tall terrain that was blocking line of sight and that we could hide behind. And it was a game where both sides had to build up their strength because they were in reserves. And if you stuck your neck out, it was hard to stick your neck out in a way that you were supported, because you would have to stick a neck out and another nearby platoon would not be able to give any fire support because they can't see. And your reserves are coming on from everywhere. Very challenging, and Tom found it very frustrating. He also found losing his Lorraine Schleppers in turn 1 pretty frustrating too. They were his best chance to deal with my artillery and potentially with my infantry so he could put some pressure on that objective. In the end, I managed to get 2 platoons of tanks together with another one moving up, and them armoured cars. Now I deliberately moved them onto the objective, which I knew was open, because Tom was hiding all the time for fear of getting caught, especially with me being on the high ground. So I moved them onto the objective. I then wanted to blitz my tanks onto the top of the hill and stay going to ground, hull down, so that next turn when Tom came out to deal with my armoured cars or lose the game, I wouldn't be taking much in the way of casualties, so I could clobber him back. And with the 3rd platoon coming in from the side, that was the plan. As it was, Tom concentrated on keeping out of line of sight of my tanks on the hill once again as much as possible, staying away from the low terrain beside the objective, and then because I had the smoke across the top of my armoured cars, he needed 5s from the guys at the back, 2 dice, 4 dice looking for 7s from the front because of the concealment. It didn't happen, it never killed me, and my armoured cars were within 4 inches and he wasn't. So that was a really tricky game for both of us, but in the end I just managed to concentrate my forces. I think that's what it came down to. Concentrate my forces and stuck my neck out at the right time. Anyway folks, there you go. There's a couple of games for you, showing you hopefully some interesting lists and some interesting tactical challenges on the day. We hopefully will have some more mid-war for you, but there might be a reason why we can't. But I'll come to that later folks. It really just leaves me to say, hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. And if you'd like to subscribe, hit the button to help us build the channel and bring more of these kind of games to people who enjoy playing Flames of War. And if you hit the bell button, I'll definitely see you on the next one.